jive, got the message that I gotta be alive. I'm a wild one, oh yeah, I'm a wild one. I'm gonna break loose, I'm gonna keep it moving while I'm gonna keep it shaking, baby, I'm a real wild child. I meet all the guys, I'm gonna meet all the chicks, shiver and shake it till I get my kicks, cause I'm a wild one, oh yeah, I'm a wild one. I'm gonna break loose, I'm gonna keep it moving while I'm gonna keep it shaking, baby, I'm a real wild child. Get me a chick that's all on my own, shake it till the meter comes off of the bone, cause I'm a wild one, oh yeah, I'm a wild one. I'm gonna break loose, I'm gonna keep it moving while I'm gonna keep it shaking, baby, I'm a real wild child. Keep it shaking, baby, I'm a real wild child. Keep it shaking, baby, I'm a real wild child. Keep it shaking, baby, I'm a wild one, oh yeah, I'm a wild one. I'm gonna break loose, I'm gonna keep it shaking, baby, gonna keep it shaking, baby, I'm a real wild child.
Welcome everybody, it's just such a blast to see so many people here, so many fans, but also so many musicians and associates of Johnny O'Keefe who have come today, and I'm really thrilled that Barry and Jan O'Keefe are here, Lonnie Lee and Suzanne are here, John Greenan's here, Bob Birtles is here, Lou Cash is here, Mike Seng, Alan Dale is here, Stuart Rubin from Warner Music, Jason Inman, a JOK fan and collector extraordinaire, Andrew O'Keefe is here, thank you so much for coming, and other people who've been touched by Johnny O'Keefe in over, well, really 50 years of the time we've had his music, and it's today, of course, tomorrow really is the 30th anniversary of his loss, and I just wanted to do something today to mark that occasion and to sort of celebrate his legacy.
All right. And he gave me a little record with a big hole in it. He said, this kind of stuff you have to play. And my wife Beth, as usual, was making coffee, bring out people. And we had a beautiful telephone radiogram ready to play Beethoven and every big classic. And John gave this little thing, he said, this adapter, and he put it on. And there was this explosion of sound. And Beth so stopped with the coffee, she came and said, is he singing English? And John was saying, yeah, it's Little Richard. Yeah. So I just know. And then came the big thing, broke around the clock. Bill Haley. So, dig this. Keith Williams, right, he kept translating. Dig this. Listen to this. And this is just jazz, very unsubtle. And then Freddie Beecher, met him later. Fred Beecher's guitar solo. Dig this! Yeah, I dig. I'm listening. Do you dig? And Keith said, do you like it? I'll dig this computer here. Like, listen. Yeah. And the guitar solo came on. I have a beautiful English Stratton guitar. On the Little Richard program. Yeah. You can see that, and there were white things on the F-holes. People didn't know that that guitar had about 18 nappies of Jonathan in there because John wanted an acoustic sound. So there were no solo guitars, and we definitely couldn't afford any. So we kept putting Jonathan's nappies in there and bought new. The guitar weighed about a ton, but that, in the early stadium shows I was playing that. So the guitar solo of Freddie Beecher came, and I said, do you get paid for playing it? And I said, yeah. You dig? And Keith said, do you like it? I said, yeah, I dig. Yeah. And picked up this beautiful English Stratton, and I don't play with a pick. I do the classics here. So John put the record on. Here it comes, dig. He said, listen. I said, okay, I'll have to dig. And Franny's solo came on. And paid for playing that? I said, yeah. I said, okay, play it again. He played it, and I just forbade him note for note what he was at, because it's easy. You've got triplets, semiquavers, quavers, in one hand. Ah, cool. He said, good. Big, cool. But cool is jazz. And, I mean, saxophone players, cool. Miles is cool. I have to have the same birthday as Miles. But, okay, cool, yeah. I'll play it. All right. He gave me a stack of records. See you in Balmain. And that.
Balmain Working Man's Institute the following Saturday. No rehearsal. And you were with the band for the next.
I turned up.
Yeah.
Grey tuxedo, cummerbund, black tie. And there was this band, people there. Okay. Put the guitar down. And this Yankee guy came to wear this. And he gave me a red tuxedo with black lapels and this thing that looked like a string. And I said, what do you play? He said, oh, a theme song with Miles Blues by Five. The Five of Us. I said, it's a Miles Davis song. He said, yeah, just play it loud. And that hits the drummer, and suddenly there it was, bang, this sound explosion behind me. And John said, turn it up! Turn it up! And then I looked at the drummer and said, oh, there's nothing subtle about this. Jazz gone bad. So I played, and people started dancing. And I thought, oh, what are you going to do now? And don't come close to me because I'll kick it. But apparently they were listening to blues. And I was just following this Charlie Christian and everything was coming out of that guitar. And John said, great. He said, what's the next one? And Dave just said, B flat. All the keys were in flat. B flat. I didn't know what the song was. Probably Catfish was there, very unsubtle. And John started singing. And it was, everything was harmonically talked about blues. It's cool. That was fantastic.
Thank you, Lou. Lou Cash, thank you.
I said I could speak for an hour.
So I understand the song came into existence after a gig in Newtown. What happened at this gig?
Well, firstly, I want to thank you for inviting us today. 30 years since Johnny went, and 50 years since this song was written. Before we started that, there's the latest version of it, as you just showed. Whoops. And there is the original, which is a little bit warmer. Okay. So that was done in 1958. The song has done very well. It's been a lifesaver for me. The big one was Pretty Woman. And when they put that song in Pretty Woman, I rang Dave, he was in Detroit, and I said, in Dallas, I said, you know that 12-bar blues we wrote? He said, yeah. And I said, well, is there a movie called Pretty Woman in town? He said, yeah, in Dallas. And I said, you better go and see it because the song's in it. It's right under the credits. And so that was the beginning. But the first one to record it was our friend Iggy Pop. And he did it in the late 80s, and he's just done it again. He's done another version 20 years later. And it's pretty wild, I'll tell you what. They've also done a version of a new version of our recording. They've redigitalised it, and it's fantastic. You can hear the saxes. So to answer your question, I came in, just a little thing I want to sort of bring in. Alan Dale was around, but I was with a band called Ricky Miller and the Brothers. And Ricky Miller and the Brothers, and I've got a photo here if anyone doubts that, we did dances at Balmain, and then we went on a tour with Les Brambury. We were jazzers, and we patented ourselves, as it were, on the Freddie Bell and the Bellboys. So we had the steps and all that stuff. And we did pretty well. And at the end of the tour, Les Brambury said we're going to do a show at the Sydney Stadium. But there's this guy called Johnny O'Keefe who's going to be the top, the head billing. You guys are going to be second. So, okay. So we did the big show, and it was the first all-Australian rock and roll show. It's the first time I really met John, briefly. And in those days, I used to do a thing called Johnny's Rock, and I'd take my shirt off and my jacket and my shoes and lay on the floor and play high notes. I used to bring the house down. Anyway, I did this that time. And of course, Dave Owens I'd known, he was a great jazz player. He came from Detroit, and he played like Dexter Gordon. We hadn't heard sax players, jazz players like that before. And I befriended David, and he was, and as Peter had said, he was his band which Johnny joined. So Dave and I were friends, and then our band was about to disintegrate, Ricky Miller and the Brothers. And I remember when Tony Herman, who was my friend, trumpet player, who rang me one day, we were both newly married, and Paul, and he said, "You want to make some money?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "There's a catch, it's playing rock and roll." I said, "What?" So I went along with him, and we did do fairly well. Ended up, Johnny got this deal to go on the road with Little Richard, and I'd heard about it. David mentioned it to me, but I was certainly not ever thought that I might do it. The next thing, Johnny O'Keefe rings me and he said, "Hey man," he said, "we're going on tour with Lee Gordon." He said, I need another sax player because I've sacked John Balcom." And I knew John. And I said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Yeah, I saw you doing the thing with Ricky Miller and the Brothers." He said, "So that'd be good, and Dave's recommended you." So I then said yes and met him the next Sunday and the rest of the guys. Lou, it's the first time I'd met those guys, and Catfish in the Spelson's restaurant, I think, underneath the O'Keefe, Ray O'Keefe's shop, clothing shop. So Dave was a big influence on me, and I'm just as a preamble, I'm sorry if it's going to be too long, but Dave was one of the most important parts of this whole thing, and he, with his American, as you said, Peter, American background, he knew black music very well, he knew jazz. He worked with his own group in Detroit, and they were a group like the Hi-Lo's, or if those who know the Hi-Lo's, and they were a jazz singing group, but they played instruments. And Dave had that background. Came to Australia when he met the Australian Jazz Quintet with Errol Buttle and co. They came over to hear him play in Detroit. He got interested in Australia, arrived here, did very well. But then he got sort of ousted by the local constabulary. The people that were in the ABC and that saw him as a threat. And so Dave had difficulty getting a lot of jazz work at that point in time. That's why he formed this group, and John came into it. Dave and I with Lou, we used to listen to a lot of jazz, and this was before Bob came into the band. And I'd go back to his place after we did a gig, and because his mother had died in '57, he went to America to the funeral and brought home a stack of albums, LPs, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and stuff we'd never heard here in Australia. And so used to get together after the gigs to cleanse our souls from playing rock and roll and listen to Miles Davis. So we did this gig one night at it's Newtown's, where the hub is there, the hub theatre's on one side, and there was a hall, the MUIOOF hall, Manchester United Insurance, whatever it was. There were two halls, one on the top and one on the bottom. There was a Greek or Italian wedding reception going on downstairs, and we had our rock dance. Too long?
No, well, yeah, why not?
Okay. We had our rock dance, and there we were playing away, and all of a sudden the place emptied out. We looked at each other and we went to the balcony and overlooked into Newtown Square there, and it was the biggest brawl we'd ever seen, and it was Australia's first rock and roll brawl, I think. And Dave and I looked at each other, so that was the end of it. We went home and we were listening to Miles, and that's how we just put the words together, these wild kids. David, he had a real sardonic humour, and he was saying, "What are we doing here with these kids? You know, we're creating these monsters, these kids, and this music's going to be the death of them and all that stuff." And that, the words came out of that, real wild child, I'm out of school and all that stuff. And so we didn't think much of it, and then Dave said, look, we'll show it to Johnny, you never know, we might be able to record it or something. So about a week or so later, at festival, we had got the words, Dave's got the words we've written down. Hey John, would you like to try this? And he said, oh, how's it going? I said, well, 12-bar blues, let's do it like that. And it's just on the melody, da 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 da. So that there was no sitting down writing a great melody. But John, hearing the lyrics, they just fitted him. He said, I love this, let's do it, let's record it now. So Dave and I, we all worked out a riff, and again, it was done on the spot, just like that. And that song is still producing royalties 50 years later. So I wish Dave and John were still here. Johnny didn't see any of its success. The song is a part outside of the thing that we did. It's had its own life, and I thank God for that, because I've been through some very tough times, and the song's always been there when I've needed to have some support or some money, and they keep recording it and keep putting it in movies. So Real Wild Child, as it was called, because of the movie Wild One with Marlon Brando. That's the story of the writing of.
Please thank Johnny Green.
I don't mean old, but just haven't seen you all for such a long time. It's just so wonderful that you all are here and still sprouting the wonderful news about the guy who we can all blame for giving us a career in Australia. This is the guy that you either liked or you didn't like. There was no grey with Jock. A lot of people didn't like him, and a lot of people still don't like him from that era. It's hard for me to get my head around that, because he and I had just so much in common. The thing we didn't have in common was the fact that he had so much bravado and so much wonderful charisma. I didn't have that. I was a real shy country boy. But at the same time, what we did have in common was, I guess, the thing that motivated us, and that was we had focus, and we were both pretty much perfectionists. And that was one of the things that I think a lot of people didn't like about Jock, is that he knew exactly what he wanted, whether it was right, wrong, doesn't matter. He knew that he wanted that, and he was going to get that, which God knows whether one did like him or not from those era. Thank God he was like that, because that's how we end up getting TV shows, and how we end up getting people like Lee Gordon taking notice of Australian talent. Okay, I first, I won't be long here, but I first heard of Johnny O'Keefe because we were both Johnny Ray fans. We both loved his songs and would sing his songs. And I know in May 1956 I did an amateur hour on 2UW, and I wanted to sing. You turned up there and you were given 3 songs to present to the piano player, a guy called Frank Scott. And they would listen to you singing the songs, and they'd say, okay, you do that one. Anyway, I turned up with my 3 songs, and one was Just Walking in the Rain, Johnny Ray, and the other one was Nat King Cole's Autumn Leaves, and the third one was a song by a guy who no one had heard of before, a guy with a really, really strange name called Elvis. And the song was called Heartbreak Hotel, which had just been released. Anyway, I definitely wanted to do Johnny Ray. And anyway, I got there and I said, no, you can't do Johnny Ray because a guy did it just recently, and we don't want too much of the same stuff. So I said, okay, so I did the Johnny, Nat King Cole. I said, no, too slow, do this other thing with this guy with a weird name. So I sang Heartbreak Hotel and came second, but that started my whole career going. But at the end of the show, he said, Alan too, he said, I'd like to send a cheerio to the guy talking about Laurie Ricks. That was my name. Well, it still is my name, I guess, but that was my real name then. That was on here previously. He wanted to do Johnny Ray's song, but we didn't allow him to, because just a couple of weeks ago, another guy did, and he's doing we'd like to send a cheerio to him because he's doing a big concert down in Wollongong tonight, and his name is Johnny O'Keefe. Now, that's the first time I've heard this guy's name. 6 months later, I'm entering a contest to become, to find Australia's Elvis Presley. They were trying to promote this movie called Love Me Tender, which was Elvis's first movie, and once again, no one knew who this guy was, so they thought they'd try and get as much PR as they could. So I entered into this contest, and I happened to win it. And part of the prize was the next week I would be a guest performer on this rock and roll show at the Trocadero. which was, I think, one of the first rock and roll shows at the Troc. Anyway, I went along there, and it was Jock in his red suit. He was the dude that was the compere of it. And also part of my prize was that I would be on the Little Richard show, and that was part of my prize also. Anyway, I sang my songs at the Trocadero with the forget his name, but the orchestra in the shell, but it was a real straight orchestra. We did our stuff, and I didn't end up doing the Little Richard show. Somehow something happened there, and I didn't end up doing it, but Jock did it, and whoever else did it. But that was, from that moment on, we developed a sort of a relationship that was a little distant, but there was a respect. He had a respect for me, and I had a respect for him. He was 5 years older than me, so it's a wonder he did respect me at all, because I was just really a kid to this 21-year-old guy. Anyway, 1957, he was doing all his stuff, and way ahead of me, I was doing my rockabilly business. I had a little rockabilly band, and we were doing stuff through there. And then, unfortunately, in late 57, I had an accident and was taken back to my property, so my father's sheep property. So I was out of business the whole of 1958, and that was the year that everything started here, so music-wise, and I just wasn't here. But 59, I came back, and I got with Jock, and 6 o'clock, got into 6 o'clock rock and all that sort of stuff. Now, during that time, I was approached by a guy called Alan Heffernan, and he said to me, he said, "Lonnie, would you like to record?" And I said, "Absolutely, we'd love to record." He said, "Okay, well, get your band together and record 4 songs. We'll put out a little EP for you, a little album." So I recorded the songs. I had my band, the Lee Men, and we recorded these songs, and we put out this album. This was in early October 59. So we put out this little album called This Is Lonnie Lee. And they told me it did very, very well. So Alan Heffernan came to me again, and he said, "Lee has said, would you want to do a single?" And I said, "Wow, absolutely, I'd like to do a single." So he said, "Okay, we'll get a couple of songs together and go to the rehearsal above Woolworths, the ABC in King's Cross. That's where the rehearsal was, and we'll see what we can see what you can record." So I chose a couple of songs, or actually it was one song. I chose a song called "Shame on You, Miss Johnson" by a guy called Bobby Freeman, and who'd previously done a thing called "Do You Want to Dance," which was very popular. So anyway, I turn up at this at the rehearsal. The band's there. The guys sitting here were there in the band, and part of my band as well, Peter Baisley. And we do the rehearsal, do this thing, and it sounded really, really good. And Jock came along and he said, "Well, what's the other song you're going to do?" And I was so stupid and so naive. I said, "Well, I just got one song together." And he said, "Well, you've got to have 2 songs on a record." And I said, "Oh yeah, of course." So anyway, he said, "Well, what else do you want to record?" And I couldn't think of anything. My mind went just blank. And he said, "Okay, well, maybe we'll send the band out for lunch, and we'll see if we can write something." So we sat down at the piano, and we ended up writing something. And it was turned out to be "Ain't It So," which was my first seller, and the thing that started off my whole career. It took us 20 minutes, because by the time the guys came back from lunch, we rehearsed it, and there it was. Went in and recorded it, and that was it. But at that time, John didn't have much to do with Lead On Records. He was still contracted to Festival Records. He wasn't involved too much with Lead On. But it wasn't until a little bit later on that Alan Heffernan, who had been sort of by proxy looking after this thing, and although he the label, although he wasn't too much involved in the creative side of it, he just knew who he wanted to record. He was mainly in trying to sell the stuff, because they were up against EMI and at the time CBS and the Australian Record Company, and so it was very, very difficult to have these big competitors. But he was a great salesman, Alan Heffernan, and he was the guy behind Lee Gordon and really made Lee Gordon out here. But anyway, I guess around about the 1960s, maybe around about 60, the middle of 60 sometime, he had said John was really wanting to get in and do more things other than just performing. and he should have, because he was really, really talented. He knew what he wanted. He knew what a hit song sounded like. He knew the types of things that the people, he could really, really relate to the audience out there. And so many entertainers and so many executives couldn't then and still can't now. But he really had this great gift being able to do that. And so Alan Heflin thought, okay, well, I'll give him a shot. So he got a couple of the different artists and recorded them, and I was one of them, and did so well in being able to choose these particular artists. And he had a great band, a fantastic band, that just had to succeed. And of course, that with television, when television came along, 6 O'Clock Rock and the Johnny O'Keefe shows came along, well, it sort of just blew everyone out of the water. The major labels really didn't have a leg to stand on, because they weren't in contact and in touch with the minds and hearts of the teenagers of the time, whereas JOK was. Unfortunately, a few of us guys were as well. But there was a little bit of a conflict with Festival Records and Lead On Records, because Lead On was owned by Lee Gordon, and it, just as it was getting off its feet and starting to make money, because it was a liability, financial liability at first, that's when Lee Gordon himself was starting to go down. He was getting a little bit too much into the drugs, and he was surrounded himself with just people that just ripped him off blindly. He was just a little naive in that point of view. He believed everybody anyway, or a lot of people, and they just totally ripped him off. But so Lead On was going down, and Lee Gordon was going, or actually Lead On was going up, Lee Gordon was going down. So he said to Johnny O'Keefe, had been pestering him, let me have something to do with it. And so he got more and more and more involved into the administration side of things as well. And then Festival came up and said, okay, if you need money, we'll buy the thing from you, because they saw the talent that was on the label. So they paid Lee a terribly small amount of money. And it's like the story with Elvis and Sun Records. But anyway, it went on and on and on and on and on for years. John kept his involvement for a number of years with Lead On, and was one of the major forces of why it was so successful, because of his ability to be able to communicate. On the side of television, it was the 6 O'Clock Rock thing actually started because the ABC here in '59 were looking, in fact 58, were looking for, they could see that a show in the BBC in England called 605 Special was very, very popular with this sort of the jazz elite, plus as well this new emerging rock and roll scene that was happening in Europe. And so they thought out here, okay, well maybe we could work something out here and do something similar. So they messed around, they came up with the idea, okay, we'll make it a 6 o'clock instead of 6:05, so they called it 6 O'Clock Rock. And it launched in February '59. Now the first compere was a girl called Ricky Merriman, who was an American out here. She was very, very accomplished, and she was okay, but she just didn't seem to fit into this show, so they happened to get the newsreader on ABC, a girl called Tanya Halesworth. And she then became the compere for about 4 months. All this time, Jock's interest in 6 O'Clock Rock was very, very limited, because the whole idea of 6 O'Clock Rock was half of it was going to be jazz, or in fact more of it originally was going to be jazz, like 80%, and then 20% was going to be this new rock and roll thing. So it was hopefully going to satisfy the whole population. Anyway, from show number 1, the jazz side of it, even though they had tremendous bands and all the great, like Gus Mercian and all the great jazz, Tom Burrows and whatever else on there, it was the young teenage element that were watching that they weren't interested in that stuff. They only wanted the rock and roll. So the jazz part of it went down and down and down in popularity, and the rock and roll got more and more. And that was reflected in the mail and all that stuff that the ABC were getting. And Jock kept on pushing them, once again, thankfully. And eventually he said, can I be compere? You know, these people don't know what they're talking about. Tanya Halsworth doesn't know what she's talking about. This is my scene, you know. So they said, okay, we'll give you a go. We'll give you a couple of shots at it. He did it, and of course the phones, not that much phones there, but the mail that came in was just absolutely extraordinary. And so they decided to keep him on. So that was his foot in the door. Once he got his foot in the door doing that, then he decided, or he asked then the producers, Peter Page, whether or not he could have more input into deciding what the artists were going to sing, because once again he thought he had an idea of what the audiences were going to listen to. So some of the artists would come up and say, I want to sing, you know, this song, and he'd say, no, that's ridiculous. You know, who out there knows the song? Why don't you sing this because it'll suit your voice? Everybody knows it, and you'll be a hit. And that's what happened. And so he chose these different artists to perform on it, and also chose many of the songs that the artists did. It was because of J.O.K. and the rawness that he had that hit the hearts of the people watching around Australia. And while Bandstand was doing its thing and all pre-recorded and all nice and lovely and all that, it was a great show and it got to lots and lots of people. It was, I believe myself, that it was 6 o'clock rock that was the one that really kicked rock and roll and kicked the idea of Australian superstars on, and we can really thank J.O.K. for it. And I'd like to just say, just before I go, that it's wonderful to see Barry and to see Andrew and Jock's family here, because they do have to be very proud of this man who I knew very well. He was the best man at my wedding. We were very had a 5-year age gap. We were very different in lots and lots of ways, but as I said before, we had this core thing together, and he really did respect me. We'd have very deep conversations about different things. He respected me, and I had incredible respect for him. The loss, I was overseas, I lived overseas for many years in America, and I was over there when I heard about his passing, and it was very sad for me. It still is in a way today, because I would hate to think, I would like to think that if he had maintained the status that he had, and if not live, but in the administrative side of show business, we would have had a much more stable show business, and a business that was at times wasn't tilted one way or another, because this man knew exactly the direction he was going in. Anyway, thank you for the time that I've given you. I hope I haven't bored you too much, and there you go. Thanks.
She's so tough. That's why I love her, love her. Well, I saw a pretty little girlie walking down the street.